When I joined startups, it was not fashionable. It was a big risk. That was also an opportune moment, I would say, because this is around 2014-15 when edtech was just growing in India. But no one had really cracked B2B market. If you ask me, the one trend that's going to really take over marketing is that everyone becomes a content creator.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in founder-led marketing. A
Yeah.
lot of founders have to come forward in front of the camera and tell their story. A lot of the media coverage today is on founders and investors, but not so much on startup employees.
Yeah.
I think there are lots of fabulous professionals out there who are the wind beneath the wings
Yeah,
of many of these
exactly.
companies.
Hi, welcome to another exciting episode of On Tap podcast. Today we have Srinivas with us. He's a seasoned marketing professional with over 23 years of experience across industries such as SaaS, conversational AI, and EdTech. Today we'll get to pick his brains and understand more about his experience and how he's currently acting as a consultant for a lot of B2B companies for their marketing. Over to you, Srinivas. Why don't you say hi to our audience and then we get started?
Hi, thank you. Just want to say thank you for having me on the podcast, and excited to be here. And hopefully, I can share whatever I've learned in my career with you.
Sure. Srinivas, why don't we start with understanding how your journey has been so far, what has shaped you as a marketing professional, and some of the interesting experiences and knowledge along the way?
Sure. I didn't, ironically, I didn't start as a marketer. I started as an engineer, as most people do in Bangalore. You get an engineering degree, and I worked for IBM in their labs for a while. And then I started doing my MBA at IIM Bangalore. It was a
Okay.
program that allowed me to work and study. So I
Okay.
could. It was a 3-year postgraduate program called PGSEM. So that's where I sort of fell in love with marketing, and I switched over to becoming a marketer while I was in IBM, and continued working for a large company like IBM, and then moved to HP.
Yeah.
So I would say that was the first phase of my career, this MNC phase as I call it. But somewhere in 2008, 2009, I decided to take the plunge and work for startups,
Okay.
and I haven't looked back since. So in the last 15 years, I worked for about 7 startups, and it's also the time when the whole startup ecosystem really picked up. When
Yeah.
I joined startups, it was not fashionable
Yeah.
to work for them. It was a big risk,
Yeah.
and I just got married. I think I took up the startup job around the time I got married, so
wow.
it was like a risky proposition, but
Yeah.
I think it paid off in the end, and I was lucky to sort of ride that
Got it.
wave.
So you mentioned you worked across some 7+ odd startups.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about your interesting experiences across them and which one do you carry the most value towards?
Yeah, I think all of them were different. But again, I was lucky that they were all at a phase when they had sort of gone past that infant mortality
Okay.
phase, that achieved the product market fit, and they were just ready to sort of scale.
Yeah.
And I worked for companies that are like 1 million to 300 million ARR.
Okay.
And they've all been very interesting. And I've always been a domain agnostic sort of an employee
Okay.
in that sense, from a marketing point of view. So I started off with Tejas Networks, which was for its time a very well-known product company, telecom hardware.
Yeah.
They eventually went public, and
Okay.
they're now bought by the Tatas. Then I worked for a telecom software company called Mobileum that had like 600 telcos around the world as their customers.
Wow.
And they used to make roaming solutions. When you land in a foreign country,
Yeah.
you latch onto a network, right? So
Yeah.
that kind of software is powered by companies like Mobileum. So through that company, I got a lot of global exposure. I went and I ran a lot of campaigns across multiple geographies. So every company sort of gave me something, and I was able to contribute. Pluralsight was a great experience as well, an edtech company, and I sort of helped launch them in India along with a small group of people. And that was also an opportune moment, I would say, because this is around 2014-15 when edtech was just growing in India.
Right.
And, the Simply Learns of the world, the Coursera's had just come up. But no one had really cracked the B2B market. And Pluralsight was one of the front runners in that space. So spent about 4 years there. I think that was a very memorable experience. The company also went IPO in
Yeah.
that point on NASDAQ. Since then, I worked for Gupshup. Gupshup became a unicorn
Yeah.
when I was with them. And they again scaled the whole conversational messaging, conversational engagement space in a
Right.
big way, acquired a lot of companies. Then I worked for Loop, which is a health tech and insurtech startup
Right.
funded by Khosla Ventures and multiple other players. So they were looking to sort of revamp the whole corporate healthcare space.
Okay.
So all of these have been supremely interesting. and I've learned. I think I've learned more than I've contributed to them.
Got it. And you also ran this show called the talk show called
Yeah.
Close the Loop, right?
Right.
What was that all about? Can you tell us more?
Yeah. So Close the Loop was sort of a branded content platform that we launched at Loop.
Okay.
And it was targeted at HR, the HR community, because
Okay.
the HR community is one that takes the call on insurance solutions, and Loop wanted to really connect with that community in a meaningful way. So instead of doing the tried and tested things like inviting people to events and roundtables, we said, why don't we just co-create, like in a way like we're doing here, right? So let's create some real insight with
Right.
people who are practitioners and ask them the hard questions. We don't want it to be like, okay, come and tell me what you do. We just wanted to challenge them sometimes, and encourage them to talk about the things that they were most frustrated about. And it was no surprise.
Lot
It
of
was actually
content.
lot of content. And people were just coming out and being very authentic. And these were all practitioners with over 20 years of experience.
Oh, wow.
And they had pretty good followership on LinkedIn as well.
Yeah.
So that show really caught on fire, I think.
Got it.
And within the community, the awareness of Loop really helped. And it was very enriching for me to meet. I met about 30 plus
Yeah, I'm sure.
CHROs there, and it was very enriching.
So can you share some interesting insights that you got throughout that show?
Yeah, I think one thing that stood out amongst all of those people was that, they had a point of view about what was broken in the system, like where hiring was broken, where onboarding was broken, where performance reviews were broken,
Okay.
or how layoffs are being handled, and how scale sometimes is a problem when
Yeah.
you're trying to scale rapidly, but your systems are not ready.
Ready.
How do you maintain culture when you're sort of adding 1,000 people in a year?
Yeah.
And these are all companies that were just hitting that growth phase. So they were all facing that. So that was a common theme that came out of from most of these people. And I could also get a sense that how much they cared for
Yeah.
people. And I think that's why you choose HR as a profession.
Yeah.
But they were also very there was also frustration because they saw a lot of decisions which were not very people friendly. So they
Yeah.
had to be part of that as well. So those were some themes that usually came out of these
Interesting.
conversations.
Great. Currently, you're consulting a lot of B2B companies for their marketing strategies.
Right.
So tell us how that is going on and how did you decide to take this plunge?
Yeah, I mean, I had worked for almost 2.5 decades in a full-time role. And I think in this whole startup phase, I found that most companies sort of go through the same beats. It's like when a kid is born, it goes through that neonatal
Yeah.
infancy, then it becomes a toddler, teenager, adult. So most companies go through the same phases, and they also face the same kind of challenges when it comes to marketing. And I'd sort of gone through a few of those cycles. So I said,
Okay.
instead of focusing only on one company, why not take my learnings and share them and make an impact across, or
Yeah.
help multiple companies. That's one of the reasons why I decided to make that shift. And it's only been about 3-4 months now.
Okay.
But it's already been very interesting because I work across a diverse set of companies.
Yeah.
And I'm able to sort of get in and solve problems. And the best part is, I always use, it's a crude analogy, but it's like pest control, right? When you call someone for pest control, you want them to solve a problem. You clear the house for them. You cooperate with them in the best possible way. You don't need to make friends with them. So you just go, you do your job that you're good at,
Yeah.
show the result, and then you move on.
Yeah.
And then you move on to the next one, which I think at this stage of my career and life, I really enjoy.
Got it.
yeah.
So, can you tell us some interesting projects that you've taken up or
Yeah.
any interesting impact that has been delivered?
Sure. I am consulting with a Gen AI startup, and they are looking to democratize the use of Gen AI in enterprises. Like today, what's happening is a lot of enterprise employees use Gen AI tools, but they use like public versions, like
Right.
publicly available
Yeah.
ChatGPT and all that. But there are a lot of security issues
Yeah.
there, and you tend to share a lot of info inadvertently,
Yeah.
which the LLM starts learning from, and
Yeah.
you don't realize it. So they have a lot of tools to cater to that. Plus, a lot of companies have rich insights in terms of their internal documentation and stuff, where LLMs can actually be deployed
Correct.
to learn and help employees with newer insights. But no one really has cracked that market. So the company that I'm sort of consulting with, Gate AI, they're trying to do that.
Okay.
So that's one example I can give.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Srinivas, tell us about a few interesting marketing strategies that you've implemented across your 2.5 decade long career, which have really stood out for you and they have stood the test of times.
Yeah, I think I've been fortunate to have been part of category creation in working for these multiple startups. So I think category creation in itself is a very interesting marketing strategy because you sort of become a segment of one. And of course, your category has to over time be big enough that other players come into the category
Yeah.
as well. But you'll always be the one that created it, like HubSpot created inbound
Yeah.
marketing and all the great examples that you have. So category creation is probably my favorite marketing
Okay.
strategy because it all starts with writing down the narrative of your company and why that category should exist, what's broken in the world today,
Yeah.
what is the ideal state, and how you can help, and who you are. That becomes the definition of the category. And then bringing that to life on all the corporate assets, uh, internally training all the employees with the same narrative, using various channels like content or PR, events, and sort of repeating the same thing across multiple touch points over a period of time. And also ultimately in your sales scripts, the BDR scripts. So it's a very fulfilling journey which starts on a piece of paper,
Yeah.
but eventually it sort of comes to life in across all the touch points that a company has and at scale. So I think that's probably, if I had to pick one marketing strategy, I think that's what it would be.
So this one was used where exactly during your journey?
So in multiple places, like in more recently in Loop,
Okay.
the category was health assurance, which
Yeah.
is a combination of healthcare and insurance. At Gupshup, it was conversational messaging,
Yeah.
which eventually became conversational engagement. So that is a legitimate category in itself. Pluralsight was about a technology learning platform, which was a new category at the time. It didn't exist. Cloud data lake at Qubole,
Yeah.
and a whole bunch of these. These are all, and I mean, and interestingly, all these companies were path breakers, so they were able to legitimately go and say that we are creating something that
Yeah.
didn't exist. So the whole marketing around that
Okay.
is super interesting as compared to sort of run the business kind
Right.
of marketing.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I think even now the work that you're doing is in a way category creation
It
itself.
is.
Even
It is.
now.
It is, and
Yeah.
it invariably you end up doing that, but it's a real test of your skill and your
Yeah.
ability to, not just of the marketing person, but of everybody in the company,
Right.
to be able to convince a customer that, hey, this is something really new
Yeah.
that in many cases they don't even know that they
Yeah.
want, and you have to convince them of that.
Right. Right. If you have to identify or pick any new emerging marketing strategy or theme which you think is going to become big going forward, which will it be and why?
I think that a lot of the traditional marketing tactics are going to go away, in my
Like?
opinion. Like events, trade shows, roundtables. Because over a period of time, and I know it might be a contrarian view
Yeah.
because these are massive industries on their own. But today, if you look at what's happening in marketing today, especially in B2B marketing, there is a huge downward pressure on CAC
Correct.
and customer acquisition cost. And I think part of the reason is because a lot of these formats have run their course.
Yeah.
And what you actually require is to identify a set of customers who are meaningful to you, who have a real intent to buy
Right.
the product or solution that you're offering, and engage with them in a meaningful way. It
Yeah.
could be just sitting across and having a conversation with them. It could be, having just creating an environment where they just a few of them walk in and you do a little bit of networking. It doesn't cost much to
Huh.
do, but it completely changes the conversation that the brand is having with the customer.
Exactly.
And I think that content, if you ask me, the one trend that's going to really take over marketing
Yeah.
is that everyone becomes a content creator.
Yeah.
Right, which is what you're doing today as
Yeah.
a co-founder. I'm a big believer in founder-led marketing. A lot
Yeah.
of founders have to come forward in front of the camera and tell their story.
Right.
Salespeople have to become content creators. SDRs have to become content creators. Engineering leaders and engineers have to do that.
Yeah.
So when you do that, a lot of these other traditional intermediaries that used to exist between the brand and the consumer, they start going away, right? And so I think the industry, especially the B2B front, is ripe for
Yeah.
disruption right now.
And if you were to differentiate between B2B and B2C, what exactly is the main differentiator in terms of how you approach marketing, and what are the channels that you leverage?
Yeah, so I think with I think there are lots of similarities to begin with because both of them have to take consumers through the buyers through the same journey. You have to be aware, you have to be
Yeah.
convinced and buy. But in terms of the channels, I would say that LinkedIn is becoming even ever more important for B2B
B2B.
businesses. Search has always been there, so I think
Yeah.
search will continue, but search plus LinkedIn is what most B2B companies will use. With B2C, of course, Instagram is a huge channel. The meta channels,
Yeah.
the spends on meta channels are really big. But even there, I believe that original content that appeals to whichever demographic or buyer segment that you're catering
Yeah.
to will trump paid promotions in a big way. going
And
forward.
content which is very authentic, which feels real, which is something which is not, just copied and pasted from somewhere else.
Yeah, and it can either be insightful or it
Yeah.
can be entertaining or
Yeah.
it can be both. Right?
Yeah.
But it has to sort of hook you.
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm saying all of this is because there is so much of saturation and fatigue
Yeah.
that buyers, either consumers or B2B buyers, are having, in that they're not responding to your traditional stimuli the way they would.
Correct.
Like they're not responding to a print ad
Yeah.
the way they would. Right? Today you have to flip through 5 pages of advertisements to read the day's headline on a print newspaper. But people will still continue doing print ads because people are still reading newspapers. Right?
Correct.
But you need to find a way to cut through the clutter. And the only way to do that is to use more digital, but use it to create content that is insightful, engaging, entertaining.
Yeah.
The other thing is a lot of B2B brands should start thinking about entertaining as well. A lot of people feel like, oh, B2B is very serious and all that. No, it's not necessary. You can deliver your message, but you can do it in an entertaining format.
Do you have any example for that?
So I think creating a short film on your product.
Right.
Not exactly on a product, but somebody that's using a product in a fun way or an interesting way, or two fun conversations between somebody who works in procurement and a vendor about a product that is similar to your product. These are things that can be tried, but no one has really
Right.
tried that in a big way.
Yeah.
And there is always going to be a market for that.
Absolutely. If you were to identify your favorite pick of how a B2B company has successfully done some interesting marketing campaign that has actually resulted in good outcomes in terms of either revenues or traction, which one would you pick?
I think some of the companies like Drift and Gong and HubSpot, some of these guys have really, and those are the marquee brands, or Slack, for
Yeah.
example. I think those are some of the brands that I would that are the benchmark across the industry, and we're all sort of looking at them and saying, okay, how can we replicate the same thing? But I still feel like in today's day and age, we still are waiting for that one mainstream company to come out and embrace
Yeah.
the content culture, the distribution game,
Yeah.
how to crack the distribution game on professional social networking channels like LinkedIn. I'm yet to see a company that has cracked that code.
Okay. Got it. So the companies that you mentioned, what exactly stands out about what they're doing for you?
I think you mean the Drift and all those
Yes.
guys. So I think Drift was one of the first brands to embrace the podcast platform.
Okay.
And they started a corporate podcast, but it was really about insights
Okay.
that they started delivering. I would say even before them, HubSpot, they didn't embrace video as much, but HubSpot created an entire repository for marketers that you could actually go and learn about digital marketing, about email writing,
Educational
about
content.
educational content.
Yeah.
So they became sort of explainers in chief of what they were trying to sell.
Got
That was HubSpot. But Drift, I think, just came out and said that I'm going to share my insights. The CEO
Okay.
said, I'll start a channel and share my insights. Then that podcast grew into the CMO started sharing their insights. The salesperson started sharing their insights. So that, I think it's the quintessential corporate podcast. So I
Got
think those are some of the things that echoed very well. Slack, I would say, Slack and Dropbox, they relied on user-driven growth,
Okay.
where it would be available for free, so multiple people would start using Slack, like
Right.
small teams would start using Slack,
Right.
or small teams would start using Dropbox. And even Pluralsight did the same thing by the
Yeah.
way, for learning, where an individual would pick up a learning license, then he or she would share it with their team members,
leveraging the network effect.
yeah, so it was all bottom up
Uh.
growth, and that's what helped these companies gain so much traction. And consequently, there are also companies that don't spend so much on marketing,
Yeah.
because the word of mouth, which is what everyone desires
Yes.
for, was built by the product and
Right.
the fact that a lot of people used it. Whatever marketing they did was just to leverage the whole thing, what was already there. They just had to light a match, and then the whole thing sort of caught fire. And
Interesting.
Yeah.
So in fact, the point that you mentioned around making marketing or
Yeah.
delivery to the target audience more authentic and genuine, and removing all these intermediaries in between of sorts, reminds me of this one instance which actually we saw working
Yeah.
very well, which is when we started onboarding some of the channel partners for distributing our investment products. And that was again a B2B channel, right? So
Yeah.
we figured, how do we onboard more and more of them?
Yeah.
And we were doing invoice discounting, which is a fairly new
Yeah.
sort of a fixed income product. What we did was we invited just 2-3 of them who
Mm-hmm.
were so-called identified leaders in their space, and
Yeah.
other sort of channel partners used to follow them. So they were influencers in their space.
Yeah.
We invited them, we just gave them a tour of the office, made them meet a
Yeah.
bunch of our folks, and just told them about our product, right?
Yeah.
And it was all on us. So we
Yeah.
invited them, we sponsored their stay, their food and everything, and it was a good experience for them. They definitely had no expectation. They didn't realize that it was being sold to them per se.
Exactly.
It was more like just making them aware of a new product which is out there in the market.
It's more
And-
genuine, isn't it?
Exactly,
It's like,
yeah.
okay, it's fine. I'm just showing you everything, all the good, bad, and the ugly.
Yes.
Come and have a look,
And
and
then
yeah.
at the end of the day, you learn something, and if
Yeah.
you like it, do tell others about it, and it's
Correct.
a win-win for both of us.
Yeah.
So
I think what's happened with more of these traditional formats, like trade shows, are becoming, like one of my ex-bosses used to say, it's a vendor love fest. So most of the people who attend trade shows are
there to
vendors.
sell.
There to sell, right? So and then the other thing is, roundtables and all of that, the economics of a roundtable today just don't work.
Correct.
Because if you're doing like very focused marketing, you want 8 people to attend your roundtable. You need about 20 confirmations.
Yeah.
To get 20 confirmations, you need to give them a list of 200 companies,
Yeah.
which you didn't even have in the first place.
Yeah.
Right? So, and then these media companies charge a lot. So forget about CAC, your cost per lead itself runs into
Way
a few
high.
lakhs.
Yeah.
So you can imagine what your CAC is going to be at the end of the day.
Correct.
So it's not making economic sense
Yeah.
anymore.
And most of the times, these activities actually are meant for brand building more than anything, because there
Yeah.
are better channels to do lead generation.
Yeah.
And if you want to just do brand building, there are definitely much more cost effective, more.
Yeah, and what do people want to get out? I mean, it's not like everybody who comes to an event wants to really buy from you. A lot of
Yeah.
people come there because they want to meet their peers.
Exactly.
They
Or
wanna
just know
network.
more.
They
about
want to know
what's
more,
happening.
or they just want to network and get to know
Exactly.
and compare notes and things like that. You can do that by inviting them to your office.
Yeah.
You can do that at Loop. We did a lot of mixers, which were very popular.
Exactly.
And it's a good time. Everyone's having a good time.
Yeah.
They're also talking shop a little bit.
Yeah.
But you form a much better connect.
Yeah.
And you don't need any third party to sponsor it and all that. I mean, you just put it out there that I'm creating a community.
Yeah.
This community building is also a very good way to do it.
No, absolutely. If you were to look back and go back, let's say 23 years ago, where you were just starting
Yeah.
out, what are some of the things that you would have done differently now?
I probably would have not done engineering.
I think you'll have to go longer back then.
Longer back, yeah. I would have, 23 years. Yeah, I probably would have looked to join a startup if it were available to me at
Okay.
that point in time.
Right at the beginning.
Right at the beginning. Because I think I spent about 8 years where I was, nobody's fault. It's just the way it was. So I was a small part of a small part of a small part. So you don't get that bigger picture thinking. I would have just jumped into it right away and accelerated my learning a lot more.
Got it. No, I think I myself I'm a big proponent of the startup life and
Yeah.
what it can do. Even if you're not a founder, just being a part of the early team or
Yeah.
being a part of the team at the 1 to 10 journey also helps you learn a lot and
Absolutely.
get a lot of exposure.
Yeah.
Obviously, you get tested a lot as well.
You do,
but,
yeah.
But I think that's the process of growth.
It's worth it. I mean, yeah, it is. It is difficult. It's a difficult ride. I mean, there's a lot of glamour associated with startups,
Yeah.
but it's a lot of hard work. Hard work is there across the board, but it's very tumultuous. The environment is very tumultuous. Things can change. But if you can ride through that somehow, I think you'll emerge out of it being a lot more richer in experience.
Absolutely.
And it's good that you're featuring startup employees. I'm also, I think a lot of the media coverage today is on founders and investors, but not so much on startup employees.
Yeah.
I think there are lots of fabulous professionals out there
Yeah.
who are the wind beneath the wings
Yeah,
of many of these
exactly.
companies, but they stay in the
No,
background.
especially the founding team, right? So
Yeah, especially.
this actually reminds me of one instance where have you heard of Chauffeur?
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
premium cab.
yeah.
Huh. So we were taking one ride, and we actually happened to just start talking to the chauffeur
Yeah.
who was there, and he was telling us about how his experience has evolved
Mm.
ever since the early days to now, when it has gained significant
Yeah.
scale. And he was telling us, he was actually sharing a few insights about what Chauffeur can do better right now
Yeah.
in terms of, locating the nearest driver, optimizing for the travel time for the driver to the pickup
Wow.
location and stuff like that. And we realized that he was actually running his own fleet company before.
Okay.
And because of COVID, that company shut down, and
he's doing this. Okay.
But he was really smart, right? And he was able
Yeah.
to pick up these very strong insights, which obviously not everything comes to the level of a leadership, right? A lot
Correct,
of
correct.
real insights come from ground.
Yes, and there's a lot of impact on the ground that's created, ideas that
Yeah.
germinate from individual employees that then
Yes.
bubble up to becoming
Yeah.
corporate initiatives.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do wish that more of these stories can be brought
absolutely. Great. I think thanks a lot for spending time with
Thank
us
you.
today. Before we wrap up, I'll just ask you one of my most favorite questions on the podcast,
Okay.
which is what's the one book that you're reading right now, and what's your normal genre of interest?
I usually read non-fiction, so I'm actually reading a biography of the Rolling Stones drummer Charlie Watts.
Okay.
I'm a drummer as well, so
Oh, wow.
I follow a lot of drummers. So I'm reading. I usually don't read stuff that's directly in line with my work. I read things around because I feel like there's a lot to absorb from different fields, and you never know how subconsciously they're sort of affecting you. So yeah, that's one book that I'm reading. And what was the other thing that you asked?
What's your normal genre of interest?
It's usually non-fiction, and I'm very interested in the lives of people. So
Autobiographies.
in interviews, no, I mean I watch a lot as well. So it's usually, if the interview is documenting somebody's life or whatever they've learned from their life, then I'm hooked, because that I learned a lot from that.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Great. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for watching this episode. We'll catch you in the other one. Thank you. Bye.